Thank you, everyone. So I'm Ben, and this is Adrian. And today we want to talk about building subscription sites that scale in WordPress. So to set the groundwork, cover off a few simple definitions. So first of all, for the purpose of today's talk, when we talk about subscription, we're also talking about membership. So I know the original talk was about subscriptions or memberships. The definition I'm trying to sort of, I guess, use is membership's usually a benefit of a subscription to a site of some sort, so just from a naming convention. And scale means two things for us when we work with clients. It means the technical scaling, so as sites grow, we talk about hundreds of thousands of users or pages or content, things like that, numbers of transactions per day, so there's the technical scaling aspect to building big sites. And there's also the business scale, so as a business grows from a smaller operation to a larger operation, things internally change, so very often you'll have a founder of a publication do everything, and then they start bringing in different people, so that might mean a product manager or a subscription manager or different teams. So the website and the subscription system has to all play along as the business scales, and it has to work as the site scales up. Subscription's not a new concept, and Netflix started notably back in the 90s doing DVD on demand as a subscription concept. Spotify very commonly for music subscription, and the world has exploded in the subscription economy. To more clever ideas, we see people like New South Wales Transport experimenting with subscription models around public transport, Nike launching shoes, subscription services. Subscription has been a really big economic changer in terms of people wanting to own less stuff and moving to a more elastic billing model, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to go through about that if you're interested in the subscription economy that we're sort of transitioning into maybe or not. Back home, Zora, who are a subscription enterprise consultancy, said a little while ago that in the next couple of years, over 70% of businesses in Australia will be offering products in some way or another through a subscription pricing strategy, whether that's product or even professional services. So narrowing the definition down a little bit more, digital subscription has two really main pieces that I'm sort of using as a foundation today. The ability to log in somewhere and the ability to restrict something, and usually by the means of a payment. So I can log into where I subscribe and I can access something if I pay for something. So that's a digital subscription in a nutshell. Last year, Reuters did a survey of top publications worldwide, and over 52% ranked subscription as the highest priority for a revenue perspective for publishers as the most important, beating things like ads and display, native, donations, and all that other sort of stuff. And that's where both Adrian and I work in the publishing world. So today's talk is going to be slightly balanced to publishing, but a lot of the principles still apply in a lot of different business models. So subscriptions in digital publishing have obviously helped do revenue diversification for publishers, and as publishers are moving from print to digital, translating that into subscription-based economy has helped publishers in that respect. And the other advantage for people in digital publishing where we work is the ability to start knowing more about our audience because they're logging in, and we can start to do things like profiling and progressive profiling and understanding people's behavior over long periods of time. Because they're not anonymous, we now know who they are. So bringing that to WordPress then, what we're talking about, and building subscription products in WordPress, which we're going to talk about some projects we've done this year, is three main parts to how we want to focus WordPress and subscription offerings. So that's making sure we've got a robust architecture of how we build subscription integrations with WordPress. So it needs to work from a technical perspective. It needs to be flexible when other developers may join a team or different agencies work on different parts of the subscription ecosystem. The business autonomy. So again, when a business might start working with a subscription, one person might be doing everything. So what we're looking for is the ability for a business to be able to change a price or upgrade a membership tier or move a user or do things like that without having to write code, log into a database, do anything like that. We want the business to have autonomy that doesn't need the development team to manage these kinds of things. And then, of course, scalability. We want growth. We want the business to be able to do things. We want to have lots of customers and all that sort of stuff. So there's 4 ways to do a subscription, broadly speaking, in WordPress. An off-the-shelf plugin, or more likely than not, a series of plugins to put that together. Building a plugin, so going and starting from scratch and building a bespoke plugin to do exactly what you're looking for. Going down like a microservice, which would be the more common way of describing it, but building a standalone application in another framework or another platform, and then integrating that back into WordPress. And the 4th option is the SaaS integration with a sort of on-demand cloud product, which is what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail today, is working with SaaS products. So just quickly going through the 4 options in a tad more detail, off-the-shelf plugins often are great to get a proof of concept up and running. There's no shortage of WordPress plugins that will do membership software. But again, if you're working in a large business that is, say, doing $1 million in subscription revenue, the economics of using a plugin that costs $100 that powers this entire business is not a usual comparison you'd make in any other part of in a business decision matrix. So often quick way to get started, but long-term implications and getting out of that plugin ecosystem can be very tangled and complicated and painful. A lot of these plugins are often, I guess, more generic built to suit the masses because they're a plugin. And as businesses want to do nuanced or specialized features, you now have to either try and reverse engineer plugins, stopgap solutions, multiple plugins, things like that. So the last thing with plugins that we've found or been burnt with as well is debugging performance. So lots of traffic going through a subscription process, trying to understand where server performance is lagging or where database performance is lagging, and understanding these kinds of things. And again, if you're paying $200 a year for a plugin that does everything, it's very hard to sort of have high expectations of it can do everything that you're wanting it to without knowing. Building a bespoke plugin is slightly better in that you're now going to have more flexibility. You sort of know exactly what you're building. It's going to be able to work the way a business may want the subscription product to work. But it's a long-term commitment to make sure the plugin continues to work. You're now taking the risk of managing things like Stripe API integration, and if Stripe updates their API, you've now got to update your corresponding API to make sure that works. So you have to explain to either your stakeholders or your client or whoever that is that it's a long-term investment to make sure that this continues to work. And if you're like anyone who we work with, are always wanting to do new features and exciting things that excite clients or excite subscription customers, rather than saying we have to upgrade an invoicing API, which is a very unappealing concept to spend money when there's more things to be doing. And yeah, it's the investment in sort of maintainability. Going down a microservice sort of architecture of building something in, say, a Laravel or a CodeIgniter or 100 other different products may be a bit quicker, but you've now broken out of the WordPress ecosystem, so you've now still got that long-term commitment of managing these 2 different things with the risk of that you've now got 2 tech stacks, so maintaining that is also going to become more complicated, as well as maintaining API integrations with things like payment gateways. You have to manage that with WordPress as well. So some quick advantages in working with specific frameworks for this, but there's a higher cost of ownership over a longer period of time as well. Brings us to the 4th, which is our flavor at the moment, which is integrating with a SaaS solution. So these are cloud-based vendors, the likes of Chargify, Recurly, and things like that, that are a business model of building subscription products and basically tying an integration between WordPress and Chargify, or whatever the product you want to talk about is. It allows you to focus on business development on the site that is subscriber-facing, so building features that subscribers are seeing and not having to build stuff that is not fun or exciting from a business perspective. And it allows business users to deal with a product that's exactly designed for what they're working with, and having a seamless integration sort of will speed up day-to-day operations and things like that. So there are 4 ways of doing it. We've been doing a lot with SaaS, the SaaS way, and we'll go through how that's done in a minute. But to sort of give some background, Adrian's going to talk about his sort of history with Crikey and their evolution of going through some of these options. And then I'm going to talk about a client that we've done and their sort of last 3 to 5 years of going through a subscription system and how that scaled and stuff like that. So I'll hand over to Adrian.
Thanks, Ben. So yeah, as Ben mentioned, I've been with Crikey for some time now. When I first started, they were actually extremely hesitant to bring on someone who was both a product manager and a technical person. And the reason for that was they'd had an extremely bad experience. The experience that they'd had was they had an existing subscription service. It was custom built for them. Something called Subscriptus. You can look it up. It doesn't really exist anymore. It was kind of a thought bubble. It was weird. But to cut a long story short, they decided this isn't working for us. It's not meeting our business requirements. We're going to migrate to another platform. These guys look fantastic. We're going to move over to them and everything's going to be wonderful. They did their due diligence. They thought everything was going to be great. They thought they had all their ducks in a row. It was like, right, we're going to move from Subscriptus to these new people. Someone flicked the switch and they did not take a payment for the next 2 months. So now you've got a business where you can't really concentrate on work because all you can hear is your management grinding their teeth and everybody is stressed. And it's not really a very fun place to be. So when it came time to take on a new person such as myself, that was a very long interview process because they did not want to have that issue again. So one of the very first priorities that I had when I came on board was to take us away from this new platform that they'd signed up to. So what was so bad about this new platform that we'd signed up to? Well, firstly, we lost 2 months of payments. Crikey is an organisation that lives and dies by its subscription base. If we're not getting paid, we can't really operate. It's just not good. Then, of course, there's the product itself. Now, for those of you who have subscriptions, and I dare say most people in this room have got a subscription of some kind, whether it's a Spotify subscription, Apple TV, heck, some of you may still be getting the newspaper delivered. That is probably like the oldest subscription model that is around. And it's totally valid. So subscription models, they're not new. They've been around for quite a long time. So as far as these subscriptions are taking place, we have a monthly subscription, we've got a quarterly subscription, we've got our annual, we've got our concession rates that we offer to people. We also have like student discount, student prices. So we've got multiple tiers of subscriptions. But with this product that we'd moved to, it was like, well, what if we've got all these people on a monthly plan and we want to move them to an annual plan? Oh, we can't do that. Oh, okay. So that was a problem. Then it's like, right, well, we want to run a campaign and we want to offer people like 15% off or 20% off to come on board and become a new subscriber. Oh, so if we do that, then we actually can't do that with our product. We have to create another product, which has got 20% off. Okay, we can kind of work with that. So by the time I started working with Crikey, they'd been with this vendor for quite some time. And the first thing I did was I looked at the products. I'm like, why is there like 150 products? They're all the same thing, right? They're like, yeah. Well, which one's the main one? Most of them. It's like, okay, well, how do you work out who is about to churn? For those of you who don't know, churn basically means that when you reach the end of your subscription, you don't renew. For companies such as ourselves, that's really important. So you get to the end, so how many people are about to churn? Oh, we don't know. It's like, how do you know how many people renewed this month and how many people took out a new trial or how many people took out a new subscription? We can't tell that with our data. So there was a wealth of problems with this particular service. So shortly after I started and was kind of realizing what a mess I'd walked into, it was a case of, okay, well, let's see what I can do. Let's see what's going on. And then I got a Slack message from one of my colleagues in support. And she said, oh, Adrian, So it's not accepting payments at the moment. I think the API is broken. I'm like, oh, okay. Can you give me a contact number? Oh, we don't have a contact number. Well, what's their chat line? Oh, they don't have one. You can email them. I'm like, okay. They're based in Germany, right? So we had to wait 14 hours for a response. During one of our biggest campaigns, we have 2 major campaigns every year. We've got our end of financial year, we've got our Christmas campaign. I might have mentioned that subscriptions are the bread and butter of our business. None of this was great. So the whole experience made me really, really evaluate what do we need to get a better solution. What is it that we want? What is it that's not working for us? At that point, I started making a list. Not only did I do that, but I had a separate list, which was basically keeping notes of every single outage, every single time they didn't respond. I was making a shopping list so that if they came to me and said, oh, no, you're still in contract, you have to do this, I would basically say, you're kidding me, right? You guys are incompetent. You are costing us money. Like the amount of money that we're paying you, we're losing exponentially more because we're not able to take payments effectively. So that is the background of Crikey. And from there, we moved on to a SaaS service. And I'll talk about that more shortly.
Yeah. So Mumbrella are a client of ours we've worked with for I think 8 years now. And about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, in a very rare series of events, we got briefed with about 2 weeks' notice to build a subscription product for them before they announced it at their annual conference they have every year. So with no designs, no brief, no idea, we started building something. And it got launched, and it was essentially a login restricted site that they called The Source, and it was like a contact access database. I had a whole bunch of research and stuff that's very important if you're in sort of the big end of the media marketing industry in Australia and things like that. At the end of the day, it was basically a gravity form that I think set up like an e-way token that we stored as meta, that then we did like the Basecamp thing. We just got that part done and live, and then figured out how we charged people after that once it was already live. So we were really playing with fire, but that was really our only option at that point. And that sort of grew from this single user having a subscription with an expiry date set as like a meta field that then we sort of checked when they logged in. Is that before today's date? Okay, they can keep going. And if they had to go back and update a gravity form, and then that would set up a new token. It was very, very poorly done, but it got launched and it got done. They then continue to invest in this product over time, and we've now built this site with a very questionable foundation that we then started dealing with things like, well, how do we have like a 5-user account? It's like, okay, well, we've got this flat structure. There's no way of doing that. So, okay, we'll just use meta to connect user IDs like laterally, and that will never backfire on us. And then about 6 months later, they started wanting to do things, well, how do we change the primary account holder to somebody else? Like, we'd have to like log into the database, move all this meta to another user, and then join that, and it continues to work, and then hopefully e-way still recognize, okay, that's fine. And then that evolved even further. It's like wanting to access more features and more sort of just general my account stuff. Again, it's not making their subscription anymore inviting the people to sign up. It's just how do we do this stuff? So then we had to try and migrate that whole data schema, which was very poorly done and built on top of, to a slightly more advanced one, which is now like a custom post type that stores like the account object, and then we have like meta that connects those to users so we can easily switch them. The e-way token is now connected to the subscription entity, and then there's another custom post type where we like define the subscription products, and then that's all connected through more meta, and then we have lookup tables to join all that meta because there's now hundreds of thousands of meta fields, and it takes like 3 hours to do a cron, and like we had problems on this old server that it ran where we had to run a cron to restart PHP once a day, I think it was, because it would hit a memory limit. We could never move it because it was hardwired to how this was set up. But then at the same time, we figured out at one point, because the payment cron was taking longer and longer to go through and do it, that PHP thread was doing its reset, which meant by about the 4th transaction, it was now resetting and losing the cron. So then we were sort of lagging in payments, and it would take a week to catch up. So it just continued to be a real joy to work with. And Scott, who works for us, was really really tasked with a lot of this fun, and because no one else would touch it. I think Zach did a bit of a rebuild and then went on leave, and Scott had to launch it, so that was even more fun, especially trying to understand that data schema. So the source was really fun and great to work with from a technical perspective. It doesn't even go into how much pain the internal team at Mumbrella had to deal with managing this on a day-to-day or trying to understand how things like users and things were built, but it was that classic problem of we don't have time to like go back, we just need to keep going forward. And then finally one day they sort of from a business perspective decided, all right, we need to rethink how we're doing our subscription product, and more from the product perspective, but it was a great trigger for us to say, let's clean house with the back end, because you're spending 10 to 20 hours a month just on like keeping the thing alive, like just on support. Like, why can't this user renew an invoice? Like, oh, because they had a custom amount that was in 2012 and then they migrated, and it would just be like this log of going through the database to understand things that were happening every day of the week, which is not how a business should run, and we weren't spending any time on the product for them. So the source died. We deleted all the code base one line at a time, therapeutically. But we rebuilt Mumbrella Pro, which was their new product. They wanted to bring it closer in with their branding, and they'd sort of gone through a corporate rebrand as well. And part of that was building a fresh site, fresh content taxonomy, and all of that was great. And we decided to not build a subscription engine. We wanted to go to a various SaaS product, so we didn't have to have an arm's length with anything to do with invoices, billing, GST, refunds, upgrades, downgrades, trials. We don't want to know any about that. We don't have to get asked to create coupon codes or custom types of coupons. Any of that sort of stuff is just a waste of our time. So Chargify was top of our list, and we'll go through how we arrived at that. And we were able to do a migration out of this custom WordPress integration into a new WordPress site. Chargify was what allowed us to do actually to migrate tokens out of our custom Bespoke thing into Chargify, and it just picked up and continued to bill as if nothing had ever changed. And we migrated hundreds of users without a single payment failing or going wrong or anything like that. So in that sense, we were able to destroy this old site that was very hardwired, how everything was built to an incredibly clean system where WordPress is just running content and users, and Chargify is doing all the business logic. We don't get asked to run reports anymore. We don't have to do anything like that. It's all managed through a platform that's designed for that, and it gives us that ability to move at different speeds. So I think finding a platform was back to you and your process going through.
Yeah, thanks Ben. Ben, you actually reminded me of like some of the other issues that we faced when...
It's like therapy. We could spend the whole afternoon probably talking about what we've worked on.
Look, when I was putting this presentation together, I was talking to some of my colleagues. I'm like, do you remember when? And they're like, oh God. There was just terror in people's eyes, which just goes to speak that when you come to a solution and you move forward with it and you're happy with it, it's how much pain gets left behind, and and typically when people have had trauma, you like to leave that behind, which is a good thing. So, getting back to finding a platform. So from our perspective, here we were with a platform that was not great, and we wanted something that was better than not great. Ideally, we would want it to be great. So I made a lot of lists. I just made a massive Excel spreadsheet, and I wrote down all the things that we wanted. I spoke to the support team because they were facing the brunt of all the people who were calling up or sending emails saying, you guys suck, you can't even take money. The payment flow was like a choose your own adventure. It was, I was amazed that they were actually able to take money. Even worse, if you were a renewing person who'd been with us like for 4 or 5 years, it was harder to give money on a subsequent basis than it was on the original basis. So, as I said, make lists, check with your support team, make sure that that's okay. Check with your finance team because they may want to have some kind of integration with Xero's to make their reports a lot easier. And at the end of the day, time is money. It makes total sense to have that. Check with your marketing team. I can't emphasize this enough because they're the ones who come up with the campaigns that are going to be run to promote your particular service. So whether your service is, selling shoes, or whether it's selling food, or whether it's selling online publication subscriptions, it's all important. Anyone who's going to be impacted by the choice that you make, you really need to talk to them. One thing that you should also keep in mind, of course, is, depending on the kind of deal you make, you're going to be offered all kinds of amazing deals. It's like, stay with us. If you stay with us for 20 years, we'll give you a 5% discount or something stupid like that. Just be practical. So finding a platform, we've got payment processing and finance. We've got membership and plan handling. So by plan handling, I'm talking about, obviously, what kind of plans you're offering, whether it's an annual, monthly, the ability to swap out, ability to upgrade. Access to data and reporting. Cannot emphasize this enough. A lot of people kind of see it as a nice to have, but it's important to be able to forecast your revenues. It's important to be able to understand what it is that your audience is doing and to be able to react accordingly. And for it to be developer friendly. That's not a nice to have. That is essential. There is no single platform out there that is going to be perfect for you. But if they've got the tools for you to get in there and get dirty, then you can make it right for you. So, as far as payment processing and finance is concerned, we had a bunch of options that kind of tie into this category. First of all, we want it to be white label. We don't want something that says, brought to you by PayPal or something like that written all over it. It had to look seamless. It's all about trust. If they don't trust you as a seller of goods or a seller of a subscription service who they're entrusting you to provide them that service over a period of time, then you're wasting your time. Coupon management. You don't want to be creating another product every single time you are offering a coupon. That's ridiculous. So that is really important. One thing which is a nice to have is dynamic coupons. For example, Tom comes along and he gets to the point of transaction and he decides, oh, no, I'm not going to go ahead. And so, but you've got his email address, so you send him an email and you offer him like an extra 10%. Custom to him as long as he uses it in the next 2 days. A lot of people won't offer this out of the box, but with developer APIs, you can write that kind of thing. Invoice generation. Does it include tax? Australia's a bit of a funny place globally as far as tax is concerned because, if we say a product's $20, we expect it to be $20. It's not like in the US where it's like 20 bucks and it's like, oh, by the way, actually, no, it's like, however much because it's got tax on the top of that. So you need that to be included. Promotion options, referring to a good or service being offered by, so I think that kind of came underneath the coupon management. But flexible payments. There's been a lot of talk about micropayments, the ability to maybe pay per article or something like that. Some people are interested in that, some not so much. As far as I'm concerned, for our particular model, weekly, monthly, annually, super important. The ability to switch between, I can't emphasize enough how important that is because generally speaking, people will start on a monthly basis and once they're comfortable with you, it's much easier to upsell them to an annual. And once you've got them on an annual, they are much less likely to churn. So membership and plan handling. So you've got membership level plans. So of course, I've kind of spoken about those already. Access rules. Generally speaking, if you're going to have a membership plan, particularly with WordPress, then you're talking about access. And if you're talking about access, then you're talking about, well, how much am I preventing the customer from seeing unless they're a member? Are you showing them the first 2 paragraphs? Are you showing them no content whatsoever? Is it like just a standard sign-in form or something like that? Does this platform handle it for you? So there's questions around that. Trial periods, there's multiple ways of going around this. Probably one of the industry standards ways now is to take their credit card details, give them like a month for free or something like that. But because you've got your credit card details, if they don't opt out, then it just auto-renews. I'm sure anyone who's worked with Stan or Netflix are very familiar with that kind of approach. Unique registration pages. That's also quite important because you've got different audiences. You've got your concessions who are on a very different rate to what the retail market is. And it might be a difference of about 40%. It kind of looks weird if you're saying, I'm more than happy to give you this for $200, but I'm going to give it to you for $150. You're nicer. The ability to pause and resume your subscription, That can be handy. Some people like to travel internationally. It's not necessarily such a big thing with digital nowadays, but some people like going off grid and they will actually contact us and saying, I'm going to be living in a cave for the next 3 months and I don't want my access. Switch plans and frequency I've spoken about. Transactional emails, well, that's a given, but the ability to customize those is pretty important. Change user email address. Ben was actually referring to this with Mumbrella, and I can tell you now that was a nightmare for us before. Yeah, I mean, everybody here is aware that, of course, that in WordPress you cannot change your username once you've created it. You can. It's just really bad practice. But if somebody changed their user email address, that would just get kicked up to development straight away. Should not be the case. And finally, reminders. Well, reminders kind of tie into transactional emails. But again, all of these things are things that you need to be mindful of. Access to data and reporting. So, how many people who take out a trial are actually converting? Because that tells you what your marketing campaigns are like and what needs to be tweaked. How many new subscribers are you getting? How many subscribers are moving up and down? What kind of revenue retention are you managing? What kind of revenue breakdown? Like, there's a difference between the two. Subscriber churn, can't emphasize this enough, that should be around like 10% or so, but in some instances like 24%. Revenue forecasting, change your email address, I'm not sure why that's there, but it's okay. And accessing raw data via the API, because that way you can actually create your own custom reports, which can be very handy, particularly when you might want to work with a data scientist. Finally, developer friendly, and that enables us to do some very cool things, which I will probably speak to later, but things like offering users an extra month for the sign up. Other considerations, costs and contracts, make sure that you don't take out too long a contract, and support, make absolutely certain that they've got 24-hour support either by chat or by phone, and that you've got an account manager who can look after you.
And then just very briefly, because I know we're out of time now, this is the sort of way we've been working with this in WordPress in building. So we've both been using Chargify a lot as a SaaS product. We both really have enjoyed working with it. I know Crikey and Private Media have had huge savings and huge ability to get stuff done, and it's just made their life so much easier. We've done a couple of big projects on it this year as well. The flexibility and migrating to it has just been so good to work with, and our team loves it. It's been really handy. It allows us to build a WordPress subscription product. It lets WordPress be a CMS, manages content, manages users. We can do those white label sign-up pages. We can talk to a Chargify API. We can let it deal with things like credit card processing and accounting software and things like Xero, and the user doesn't leave the experience. Things like renewals, we can let Chargify run that. It can do every charge it needs to do. If it's good, it will just tell us through a webhook. That person's good, extend them. If not, it'll bring it back and say, turn that user off. We need to figure out why they haven't done it. And Chargify, again, has got great internal tools for managing dunning or failed payments and all that sort of stuff. And we're doing very little at WordPress, and it gives us a lot of autonomy to not have to worry about tying too closely into the integration. Lets WordPress do what it does well, managing and scaling content, something WordPress does really well. It manages users and logins really well, or fairly well. And let a tool like Chargify or whoever you go through to manage high-frequency payments, things like PCI compliance, complex subscription management, like writing all the queries in that natively. If a plugin doesn't do that, it's just so much nicer to offload that to somebody else. Let it deal with all the emails and things in the scale like that. Our summary, and thank you.
The only thing that I will follow up to say that after we did move to our SaaS solution, which was Chargify, our costs went down, our ongoing costs went down by 60 to 75%. And the transition time I mentioned before, that we lost 2 months of payments, our downtime was 0, which had people in my office basically thinking that we were rock gods. So that was kind of nice.
Cool, thank you, Ben and Adrian. Any questions? Yep, right up. Get your run on.
Thanks, guys. That was really interesting. Given the way it sounds like Chargify through the API will talk really nicely with WordPress. Has that given you any thought, probably you, Ben, more so, about whether there is a plugin solution that could be built deliberately on that model?
So
or
there
does
is
that have the
a
same pitfalls as what you were saying earlier with a plugin solution?
There is a WordPress plugin for Chargify that I think the guys at 9C's built, but it doesn't look like it's been that updated. I'm trying to pressure Chargify to get us to build a new one, whether that'll happen or not. But I guess the thing for us, there's not a lot of integration, like same way Crikey's built. Like there's a Chargify system, there's a WordPress system, and Chargify has a really, sort of like working with Stripe, really good webhook system that you can monitor and test and emulate. And so we've sort of built half a dozen JSON API endpoints that are all authenticated and all that sort of stuff. And that's about it. Like we didn't have to build very much. The sign-up stuff, there's a bit of custom dev, hooking into how that all works and making sure. But there wasn't a lot of custom code considering the complexity. And one thing I glossed over was that it's sort of decoupled in the sense that if Chargify goes down, WordPress is still off and running. The system that Crikey was on beforehand, it made a live call every single page request back to the system. And when you looked in New Relic, you're like, why is there just this 3-second like web background process? And it's like, oh, their API must be running slow at the moment. And you just have all these crazy kinds of things. So, and what makes also with working with Chargify, again, it's not a paid endorsement of Chargify, but if you were to move away from Chargify, you would really just be able to plug in another system. It's sort of decoupled enough that we're not locked on Chargify. WordPress still has all the data it needs. It has like a Chargify user ID, so we know who it is, but you could quite easily transition that to another tool if you wanted to. We're not doing live lookups every single page load to check if a user should be able to access this piece of content, stuff like that. So we're kind of really using it as a utility, not as the heart and soul as the whole product. Yeah.
I'll probably expand just a little bit on the plugin angle. So, I mean, my background is really developing processes that enable the administration, whether it be marketing, publishing, et cetera, to be able to do what they do better. So I've been able to extend the admin through things like advanced custom fields or something like that. So they're able to create their own campaigns. So, you know, you create your discount or whatever in Chargify, but then you can, via the advanced custom fields, which talks to, via the API, you can do things like, oh, okay, well, if they take out if they use this particular coupon code, we'll give them like an extra 2 months' time or something like that. That's not something that Chargify offers out of the box, so that's what I'm talking about in terms of like off-the-shelf products. But because of the API, you can extend that and do, a lot of other fun things.
So thanks for it's a great presentation. How quickly, like the turnaround time, from when you decided to use this new SaaS system to when it was fully operational and you were comfortable with it, how long did it take?
So from a clean build or a migration clean build?
Well, from your, I don't know. You can do
so like the Umbrella Pro one, there was a lot of work that was nothing to do with Chargify. It was trying to understand all the old data. It's like, well, the way it was built in V1 stored it this way, and the way the date was stored in V2 was this way. So there was a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of conference calls to figure out, like, just to clean the data. So if you strip all of that out of the process and the PTSD that came with that, like, building the Chargify integration was actually pretty easy. Like, it was, and because that migration was migrating users out of an old WordPress site into Chargify backend, and it did webhooks, and it all just synced up and married up perfectly. So that was like, I think, less than a 3-month project, including migrating 3 versions of user data into Chargify, merging 3 versions of ACF data, which was nothing to do with this talk, but probably equally or more painful than the user data, going through 3 iterations of ACF storing content, migrating that into a new WordPress instance, and a whole bunch of other stuff. The Chargify piece was not a significant piece of work. Like I said, it was like half a dozen endpoints, and it works really well with testing and stuff like that. So it has always felt, for me, very confident. I've never been like, oh, why did that just happen? I'm a bit iffy about Chargify. Like, it's always been very robust. So it's never given me a reason to doubt its ability. So we've had pretty good success.
Yeah, I dare say we had a very similar time frame as well. But of course, we decided to make our lives a little bit more complicated by reskinning the site at the same time. But yeah, it was pretty painless. Like the Chargify took our existing tokens out from the old payment system, transferred it to the new ones. They did that behind the scenes for us. And as far as our development work, we're probably talking for the Chargify specific stuff and the paywall specific stuff, maybe about a month. But that was because we were super anal about making sure that everything was within our infrastructure and looks like it's within our stuff. If we wanted, there's an option where you can basically port over to, like, you know, your subdomain.chargify.com and you skin that a little bit, but
billingportal.com or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
they've got a whole white label billing portal, so, but yeah, Chargify, Crikey's got a
and you can do
custom
that,
one.
which, you know, will save you like a couple of weeks. But we didn't want to do that. We want to make our lives difficult and make it look good.
And in terms of risk, like the stuff that really is nice with us, for us, is that it's, I guess, more of an enterprise-grade product. Stuff that we've been burnt on with other projects that I pulled out of the slides, but where, you know, you're running sort of a plugin that runs on another plugin that connects to Stripe, and like it runs off a WordPress cron that triggers a webhook. You know, and if you pull that to a local dev, you think you've got every sandbox. So we had one of our front-end devs pull a site down. Everything we thought was stripped down to sandbox mode, and he removed like a tier, like the silver subscription, and that somehow triggered this, which triggered that, which still had a ping to the production Stripe account, cancel their subscription, pinged the production websites, webhook, deleted the users. So Zach and I like had to manually recreate, like it was, and it's just like these tools aren't designed for that kind of work. Whereas something like Chargify, we have two different instances. Everything is explicitly clear. Like we've just never had something. Whoops, we build a client, or we didn't build a client, or we just deleted everything, or. WordPress and managing things like crons and schedule tasks and stuff like that can get very daunting very quickly if you're not really across it and like, did all the bills go out? Did all the invoices go out today? You better just double check. You know, when you write your own, they're the risks you take on that you have to manage yourself and hope that your queries aren't missing a one, that, you know, you just didn't bill any of these clients for 3 months and things like that. So yeah, we've never had a worry for it. So.
No more questions?
I think there's one over there.
We'll
I
feed
just
him.
want to
We'll
ask
feed him.
about the PCI compliant of the Chargify. And how do you, like, what sort of payment available? Like, is it like PayPal, or do you also support like Afterpay or something like that?
So in terms of the integration from the PCI side of things, they've got an API similar to a bit like Stripes and eWays, where it's like a client-side JavaScript combo backend thing. So, you know, you'll do part of the transaction through a token back to the site, then it'll validate and then send the rest through a webhook. So you're not sort of no credit card details are touching your site. It's all getting done client-side and then validated through a backend IPN kind of thing. So. In terms of PCI, we never touch credit cards. It's always client-side and through their new API and similar to a lot of credit card APIs. And did you want to talk about the options like payment gateways and stuff? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot.
Well, I mean, we're using Braintree, but we could have used Stripe just as easily. I have spoken with Chargify recently. They've got Google Pay and Apple Pay coming up soon, which is going to be kind of quite big for us.
I don't think Afterpay would work because Afterpay you'd always be. That's a subscription. It's a subscription already. So Afterpay is like a subscription for the first payment of the subscription. So you'd probably never really get ahead on Afterpay for a subscription product.
And certainly from our perspective, Afterpay is just it doesn't make any sense for our particular business model. So we wouldn't even entertain that.
You would just set up like a subscription product of weekly. If you wanted to like get the amount that small, you could just have a weekly subscription pricing version. Yeah, would be the way to do it.
PayPal, yes. Yep.
We haven't used PayPal in a long time either. Credit card seems to be a bit more fluid.
Question
And
up the back there.
And also
the politics of PayPal.
Well, yeah, they charge a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, we're using eWay, Braintree, Stripe. It's pretty flexible like that, so you can plug and play with different vendors.
Hey there. You said you use Braintree, is that?
That's right,
correct?
yes.
What was the kind of decision process behind that versus?
Legacy.
Okay.
It was purely there when I'd arrived, and I didn't want to. I mean, that process, we changed a payment platform, a mail delivery platform, probably within like within maybe a 3-month period. So effectively, all of our big providers were being changed at the same time. I really didn't want to make my life any more complicated than it had to be.
And I think before it was Braintree, it was like some weird, not mainstream credit card processing brand. So it went from that to Braintree. and I'm guessing that was like one less fighter, like poke the bear anymore with all the various tools that are getting changed. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing against Stripe. I personally use Stripe for any personal project that I work on, and they're great. All things being equal, I'd probably prefer to be over with Stripe because I think they've already got stuff to do with Google Pay and Apple Pay, etc.